There were many receivers and playmakers who were taken in this year's NFL draft, and as each round went by, people paid less and less attention to the player who was being selected. At one point, the subject of today's video was one of the best young receivers in college football, was praised for having NFL ability in high school, and was rated as high as a potential first or second round pick. Unfortunately, for a few reasons, his stock would fall over a couple of months, but the Jacksonville Jaguars, in my opinion, got a complete steal with this player. I believe he's not only going to make the roster, but he'll be one of the best receivers on the team and could really surprise some people. Today we're going to be talking about Parker Washington. He played wide receiver at Penn State, and in my opinion is the most underrated receiver who was taken later on in this year's draft. We're going to go through his story, talk about his career, and why I think the Jaguars are getting a gem. But before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love football content, turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now, let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Parker Washington. Going back in time, Parker grew up around football, as his dad used to play in college for Mississippi State, and I guess he showed his son the ropes along the way. He ended up growing up in the state of Texas, and early on, people knew that Parker was going to be special. He would eventually arrive at Travis High School, and they had produced a couple of big-time receivers before him. They had Steven Sims Jr., who played for Kansas and in the NFL, and then they also had future fourth-round pick and former Iowa State wide receiver Hakeem Butler. His coach at Travis knew that he was special early on. He said, quote, "Even from the time he showed up as a freshman, he really stood out. Not only physically, but his demeanor and his competitiveness. You wouldn't have known he was a freshman. He stepped in right away and competed with the varsity guys and got to play a little bit his freshman year." Washington would end up having a breakout junior season, leading his team with 75 catches for 1,486 yards and 18 touchdowns. The team went 8-3, and this was the season in which programs started to chase after him. He also had a couple of viral moments as he found himself trending on Twitter after a highlight clip surfaced of him spinning and then having a one-handed catch for a touchdown. He started to blow up, and he had comparisons for himself. He said, quote, "I'm just good at any position. I can run all over the field. You can put me anywhere on offense, and I just love offense and think every college should be looking at me. I like Odell Beckham and Steven Sims Jr. I like their speed and the way they can take over the game at any time." Duke, Indiana, Kansas, and Kentucky were the first high major programs to offer Washington, but soon more offers would pour in. Surprisingly, he was probably going to go out of the state, as he said, quote, "In my recruitment, I didn't feel much pressure to stay in state because the schools in state didn't really recruit me much." It also helped that he had someone to follow along the way, as RJ Henderson was a big-time four-star recruit who played a year ahead of him and eventually chose to go to Florida. He showed Parker the way. His coach said, quote, "I thought having RJ a grade ahead of Parker was great for him. It gave Parker a roadmap in some ways." So where would he end up going? By the summer of 2019, Washington had earned 16 scholarship offers, but it would ultimately come down to Penn State and Wisconsin for his talents. In the end, he decided to choose Penn State over Wisconsin, despite a late push from Texas, TCU, and Texas Tech to keep him home and local. He never wavered. Why Penn State? He said, quote, "It felt like home, and when I get the gut feeling, that's the school I know will be the one that I pick. They stayed true to me from the very beginning." He also apparently loved their academic center, as he was making more than just a football decision. At the time, he was a Sunday-level athlete, and he had next level written all over him. He had insane athletic traits, as after leaving high school, he posted a 4.57 second 40-yard dash, a 4.13 shuttle time, and a 37-inch vertical. This was all verified at the opening, and these were NFL-type traits, but Parker was not completely new to college or the NFL. His sister served as a player personnel coordinator for both the Illinois Fighting Illini and the Chicago Bears. His coach did have one worry. He said, quote, "He put up some unbelievable numbers in high school, and a lot of the time, those were 2 or 3 yards open when we got him the ball. That's not going to happen in college." Parker ended up finishing his career with 159 receptions, 2,821 yards, and 36 touchdowns. In the 3 seasons he lettered, Travis improved each and every year. Parker was arguably the most exciting signee in Penn State's 2020 class, and according to 24/7 Sports, he was a 4-star recruit, the number 47 wide receiver, and the 276th best player in the class of 2020. So, how would Parker end up doing in state college? When Parker arrived at Penn State, the world was in a pretty interesting spot, and for a while, he didn't even know if he would end up playing football at all. He'd be stuck behind a couple of talented players, which included tight end Pat Freiermuth and wide receiver Jahan Dotson. In his first game, he'd actually get an opportunity to make an impact. He catch a touchdown against Indiana, but unfortunately they blew a late lead, and then lost off a controversial 2-point conversion. Penn State's season was off to a tough start. He caught 4 passes for 73 yards the following weekend against Ohio State, and then had 8 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns against Maryland. The Nittany Lions were 0-3, and then they dropped games to both Nebraska and Iowa, and it only got worse from there. Washington, on the other hand, though, had a great season. He caught 9 passes for 93 yards in a road victory over Michigan, had 1 catch for a touchdown in a win over Rutgers, and then had a career game against Michigan State with 4 catches for 95 yards and 2 scores. To close out the year, he helped them beat Illinois, and he finished with 36 receptions for 489 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was one of the best young receivers in all of college football, and was already getting hyped up for the 2023 NFL Draft. It's also worth noting he set the freshman record for catches in a game against Michigan with 9, and he only hit that mark once in 2021. He caught 4 passes for 47 yards in their huge Week 1 road victory over Wisconsin, and that would help them beat Ball State. After that, in a whiteout game against number 22 Auburn, he caught 8 passes in that win, and then had the best game of his career. Against Villanova, he caught 5 passes for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that would help them beat Indiana. After that, Penn State would unfortunately lose 3 straight games, but for the second straight year, he played well against Ohio State. In that one, he caught 9 passes for 108 yards, and they ended up losing by 9 points. He struggled against Maryland before he finished the year strong. He had 4 catches for 92 yards against number 6 Michigan, 6 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown against Rutgers, and 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown in that snow game against Michigan State. He'd also helped them reach a bowl game, in which they'd lose the Outback Bowl to number 21 Arkansas. He still had a strong finish though, as he caught 7 passes for 98 yards in that game. In total, he finished with 64 receptions for 820 yards and 4 touchdowns, and while his touchdown number went down, his production increased, and he was setting himself up for a huge 2022 season, with Jahan Dotson now being gone. Except things really wouldn't go according to plan. Penn State had both Brenton Strange and Mitchell Tinsley step up in the receiving game, and Washington's production stagnated. He caught 2 passes in their Week 1 victory over Purdue, and failed to score a touchdown in his next 5 games. He was decent in all of those matchups, but just wasn't making those big plays, or being that impact player many thought he could be. He would have an insane 2-game stretch though. In the whiteout against Minnesota, he caught 7 passes for 70 yards and a touchdown, and then had the best performance of his entire career against number 2 Ohio State. Unfortunately, Penn State would lose that one. Washington had 11 receptions for 179 yards and a touchdown, proving that he showed up in those big games and that all that talent was still there. He'd end up going back to earth though, as he was limited against Indiana and was also limited against Maryland. After that, he'd end up missing the rest of the season and wouldn't even travel for their game against Rutgers. At the time, there was a rumor that he broke his leg, but this would raise a huge question about him. Should he go off to the NFL or return to Penn State? His 2022 season, he finished with 46 catches for 611 yards and 2 touchdowns. His production once again dropped off, and with that potential injury, his draft stock wasn't looking great. He would decide to end up going to the draft though. He still though had some hype. One scout said, quote, "He continually improved during his 3 years as a Nittany Lion. He rounded out his game to excel in both making tough catches in traffic and doing a little bit of everything else. He proved he was capable of making plays downfield, getting open for short gains on 3rd down, or making an acrobatic catch when the offense really needed someone to step up." According to NFL Mock Database, he was a projected 4th round pick and the 133rd best prospect. The highest his stock ever was in early February when he was ranked as the 71st best player, but unfortunately, he would slide even more on draft night. Eventually, he was taken with the 185th overall pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars. This would be their 6th round selection and their 2nd Penn State playmaker. They'd already taken Brenton Strange in the 2nd round, and Washington was now going to be another weapon for him. Personally, I really like this fit, as I love Trevor Lawrence, and I like how he gets to be with his teammate, and will have ample opportunity to get reps. I don't believe he'll have a Justin Jefferson or a Deebo Samuel sort of rise, but I think he's one of those players that'll be productive for a long NFL career. He's going to do all the simple things and always dazzle enough potential for teams to keep him on the roster. I expect him to be a 2nd string wide receiver on any given NFL team, but I also think his ceiling is high enough that he could eventually become a team's number 2 option. I'm not a scout though, and maybe I'm just an extreme optimist. Either way, I really like Parker Washington, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do next year in Jacksonville. But what do you guys think? If you're a Jaguars or a Penn State fan, what do you think of Parker Washington? What do you think of this year's receiving core? And what players should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.